welcome back to the channel. I am getting ready to play around with this month's mixed media kit. In this month's kit, you will find a box of oil pastels, some Lindy's magical powder, an 8" by 8" canvas panel, a stencil, and a pack of white tropical flower transformees from Dress My Craft. To go over a few extra items that you might want to try out with your oil pastels, these blending stubs, Q-tips will work too, some sponges if you want, and baby oil. Being oil pastels using an oil, it reactivates oil pastels the way water works with watercolors, sort of. That's the best I can kind of come up with there for really explaining it. I will use some baby oil and show you what I'm talking about in a little bit. Oil pastels can be used on a variety of surfaces. You can use them on paper, canvas. The only thing that you really need to worry about, I guess, or think about, there we go. The only thing you would really need to think about is how the texture on the surface you're working on, how that will affect you. Like canvas has a little bit more surface texture than paper would. Some papers have different textures on them. You know, your watercolor papers have a certain texture. You know what I mean? So just to get started, to get going here, this was, something kind of simple. Don't want to overcomplicate things for myself too much right now. So I am just I'm working on trying to make kind of a sunset-ish background. I have the yellow and the orange, and I'm mixing the red and the blue just to try and get kind of a sunset background started for this. Now, blending stubs are relatively easy to clean, reuse. You can put them in a pencil sharpener and sharpen them like a pencil. Sandpaper to bring points back or clean them up, which is just what I'm doing right here, is just with some sandpaper. And then just, rub the oil pastels around, blend them up. I love oil pastels just because, it might take a little bit of elbow grease at times to get things blended together, but I do love working with them. I just think they're a little easier to control. Now here's my baby oil, and I wanted to soften up that blue and that red, try to get them to blend a little bit more, make a more purplish hue in there. And so you can see that baby oil just, it actually lifts it. It can almost be used as an eraser for oil pastels. So with that oil surface there, it does help me create an area that I can blend in better, if that makes sense. I do have to kind of work on it a little bit, but eventually I do get my background blended together. And I do just go through with a variety, paper towel, sponges, blending stubs, just until I get a color that I'm happy with there. Now this was an experiment. I was not entirely sure how well workable fixative would work on an oil surface. This little 4x6 panel, this was for my stash, and this is the one I was using to experiment and play around and kind of get a feel for these oil pastels. Not all pastels are quite the same. I have used different brands in the past. I just wanted to see these. And even though I did break some, I would like to say that overall oil pastels are considered the best for beginners in pastels because they're not as fragile. I mean, unless you give them to me, I will break them. Because of course I do. Anyhow, back to that workable fixative. I wasn't sure how well it was going to work, so I did try it out on my little practice canvas, and as you can see, it actually did work. It created a good enough layer. You can see I scribbled across it, and I can still blend on top of it, so I thought that was actually really kind of cool for me. Oil pastels, being oil, it's hard to find things to seal them up with, and well, there's at least one brand I know of as a permanent finishing seal for oil pastels. There's really not a lot of in between that I've ever come across or heard about or anything like that, so my workable fixative was kind of an experiment for me. I wanted my sky to stay put, and I wasn't entirely certain how well my little leaves here were going to come out, so I just hand drew very rough draw, and you can see very rough draws on some large tropical leaves. And then I use the darker green, and I use that lighter like yellowish green, the lighter green and the darker green, blending them together, working them out, trying to get my edges distinguished. I work on the leaves quite a bit until I get the shading I wanted, get the shapes I wanted. It really is just a lot of playing around and blending until you get what you want. Not really all that different from any other type of art project, especially art projects like this, paints and pencils and charcoals. There could be a lot of work that you need to do until you're happy with your product or your finished product. I come in, I do try to add a little bit of a shadow between the two leaves just to get the edges to stand out from each other, to add some definition. There we go. Add some definition and depth to this project, to the leaves. All right, you can use any kind of pointy-ish object. We'll say pointy-ish object. You wouldn't want it too sharp because you might scratch the canvas, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I did do it on purpose on my practice flower. But in this case, I just used one of my smaller blending stubs. They're not permanent yet. I'm just working out where I want the holes through my leaves. I was kind of thinking in terms of those large tropical leaves that do have the holes through them. Obviously, it's not an exact replication of those. I wasn't worried about it being picture perfect, you know. It is an oil pastel, and I am just kind of working on the fly here, working as I was thinking about it. or maybe not thinking about it. However you want to kind of think of it there. I was either thinking about it or completely not thinking about it. This is where I came in. I had decided I didn't want my leaves both facing the same direction, and I was able to use some baby oil on, I think it was a paper towel, and more or less erase a lot of one of the leaves, the back leaf, at least the edges of it, so that I could change the orientation of it there. So now I'm just reworking my leaves, coloring them through, just playing with them. There's really no rhyme or reason, no step-by-step, no easy explanation that I could give. It was just playing with the colors, playing with my blending stubs, playing with baby oil until I had what I wanted. I clean out the holes in my leaves so that the sky could be seen through them, or in the case of that front leaf, so that the second leaf would look like it was the one behind. Just playing with the shadows and the colors until I had my leaves in place. I use a Q-tip dipped in baby oil to really help me clean out my leaf holes. Leaf holes, I guess we'll just call them leaf holes. Now it's not an easy process. It's definitely not a perfect process, because that workable fixative on top of an oil surface, it really can only do so much. So I do come back in and kind of fix the sky colors behind, but it was easier to fix the sky color, the colors of the sky behind a little bit. It wasn't too bad, really. I just came through with that darker green on that front leaf just so that I could get those edges defined a little bit better. I'm really just trying to finish the details up right now on this canvas, the leaves on it, I should say. I knew that there was going to be some coverage because of the transformees that I will be getting to here. So because of the transformies, and I was pretty certain that getting those just to stick down to the oil might not be so easy. I did spray it with some workable fixative. My workable fixative is off drying, so I'm just going to take this little minute right here, or this little moment right here, to go over mixed media paper and oil pastels. Nothing fancy. I just used that yellow, darkish yellow, kind of amber colored pastel there. I'm just making a little simple circle just to show you the difference of working on a canvas and working on paper. And I did it mostly because of the baby oil aspect, something to think about if you are using a paper as your background as opposed to the canvas. I think the canvas is really, really good, especially with how much baby oil I did end up using. The canvas, it was pre-gessoed canvas, ready to go canvas, so it has a protective layer on it. It doesn't absorb oil so much. You can see the difference in surface texture here with my circle. Working on paper, well, especially this mixed media paper, which has a relatively smoothish finish, I guess. A lot smoother, more even coverage going on here. Now for the baby oil experiment. I just wanted to show you what to think about. It works fine on top of the oil pastels, because the oil pastel has already created a resistant surface. As long as you're not going to just pour that baby oil on or soak it in, it works fine being kept on top of the pastels because it has already created a barrier on that paper. What you do want to think about, however, is if your baby oil goes off the oil pastels, it will go straight through. You can see right there, the little bit that I purposely did off the edge, it will soak through your paper. I just wanted to use this little bit of time here just to kind of cover using paper as your background, especially if you're going to be using baby oil to help spread things about, while I waited for that workable fixative to dry. Now that that workable fixative is dry, I'm trying to fix the color a little bit, just coming in, still adding kind of another layer. I wanted what I had to stay put, see how it was looking after that workable fixative. I wasn't originally planning on adding another layer onto the leaves, but in cases like this, it is what it is, and I'm just trying to get everything kind of how I had it in my head. Alrighty, it is time to try to get these transformies on. I did just cut apart that entire package, separated them into like the larger flowers, the mediums, the smalls, just so I could kind of grab and go. The transformies are sticky, originally sticky on the part you want down. I didn't add another layer of workable fixative after coming back and working on my leaves some more, because I didn't use baby oil on them, and I also wanted to use this opportunity a little bit just to see how well these would stick down without that workable fixative. So the sky area still has workable fixative on it, but the leaves might have intermittent areas of workable fixative. I think about it as you doing these projects using the Tres Jolie kits. You know, I experiment for you. Help you get a preview of what might happen if you do certain things. And I will say, I did not have a problem getting my transformies in place, and I did not have a problem getting them to stay down after or on top of any part of this canvas. Once they were down, they have stayed down. And there is my finished canvas background. All of the oil pastels are on that I want on. I have my Transfer Me flowers where I want them layered up, sprinkled across. They are down. The water is dried off. Everything is good to go now. Final bit on this for a little bit of some shine and texture on here. I am using the stencil from the mixed media kit. I have a small blending brush that I am using. I'm not trying to cover, or I'm not trying to fill in the entire stencil. If it's random and, you know, has a bit of faded edging on it, that's fine by me. I'm just using some clear embossing ink through that stencil with that blending brush to hold the Lindy's magical powder in place. That is what that clear embossing ink is for, is just to give my magical powder something to hang on to. And you can see this stencil also, it has a different kind of tropical leaf design to it. So especially since I'm doing it with this Milky Way white magical powder, definition of the leaf is not important. Perfect edges on a leaf is not important. It does just create this overlay look on top of my canvas background. And I really, really love the shine of that powder on there. I think it adds just a fabulous finishing touch to the oil pastels and those Transfer Me's. And that was all there was to it for this oil pastel canvas. Depending on what you want to do, you could add a vinyl sealer on here. If you were going to frame it and it was going to be behind glass, you may not necessarily need it. I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do. My concern wasn't for the oil pastels, but that magical powder, I would want to make sure it didn't get touched or smeared or anything. I hope that you enjoyed this canvas panel and it gave you some ideas of using oil pastels, using the items from the kit this month. I managed to get a little bit of everything from this month's kit onto this panel. I did it partly for my own curiosity to see what I could get to stick down, and mostly so that you all could see how it would all work together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up and feel free to share this video. Thank you, and I will see you in July.